The king is reportedly facing a scheduling dilemma following Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's call for a general election earlier today. GB News royal reporter Cameron Walker highlighted the issue, noting that the monarch's existing commitments may conflict with the proposed election timeline. Earlier today, Prime Minister Sunak made a public statement outside 10 Downing Street, announcing his request to the king to dissolve Parliament. Earlier today I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament. The King has granted this request, and we will have a general election on July 4th. This decision, while constitutionally necessary, introduces a potential scheduling conflict for the King, who is slated to be in Edinburgh during the election period. Speaking on GB News, Walker explained, "The King has had an incredibly busy diary today, but he's had to find time in his diary to carry out one of his most important constitutional duties." He spoke to the Prime Minister, as the Prime Minister confirmed in Downing Street earlier today, and he asked his permission to hold a general election and dissolve Parliament. The King has granted that permission, and every seat in the House of Commons is now vacant. Any bill that the King has not already given royal assent to will not become law in this parliamentary session. Walker elaborated on the timing issues this election date poses for the King, stating, "This is an issue for the King, potentially, because July 4th falls within Holyrood Week, or in other words, Royal Week. This is when the King is in Scotland, taking part in the traditional week of royal engagements there. On July 2nd, he is due to hold a garden party at the Palace of Holyrood in Edinburgh. So, in theory, this means that the King is going to have to cut short his week in Edinburgh to potentially come back down to London, ready for the day after the general election on July 5th to appoint the Prime Minister. The implication here is significant. Typically, the appointment of a new Prime Minister occurs at Buckingham Palace, which suggests the King's diary will need considerable adjustments." Walker further commented, "Usually that would happen in Buckingham Palace, which makes me think that the King's diary is going to have to be shifted around somewhat." In response to the election announcement, the royal family has also stated that certain engagements will be postponed. A Buckingham Palace spokesperson said, following the Prime Minister's statement this afternoon calling a general election, the royal family will, in accordance with normal procedure, postpone engagements that may appear to divert attention or distract from the election campaign. Their Majesties send their sincere apologies to any of those who may be affected as a result. Despite this disruption, it has been confirmed that the King and Queen's planned appearances for the D-Day 80th anniversary in Portsmouth and Normandy in June will proceed as scheduled. However, the announcement of a July 4th vote has caused adjustments to other events in the meticulously planned royal schedule. The King's involvement in political matters, while usually limited, has seen some notable instances recently. His first Prime Minister was Liz Truss, whose tenure was the shortest in British history. Shortly after, King Charles welcomed Rishi Sunak as his second Prime Minister just 6 weeks after ascending the throne. Today, following the general election announcement, Sunak met with the King at Buckingham Palace shortly after the monarch hosted young winners of the Prince's Trust Awards. Their meeting lasted approximately 15 minutes in the King's usual private audience room as part of the Prime Minister's scheduled weekly audience. This general election call highlights the complex balance the monarch must maintain between his ceremonial duties and constitutional responsibilities. While the King's role is largely symbolic in the democratic process, the practical implications of his involvement are significant. His need to be in London to appoint the Prime Minister means that any pre-existing plans, such as those in Holyrood Week, must be reconsidered and rescheduled to accommodate this constitutional duty. In summary, while the King has fulfilled his constitutional role by granting the dissolution of Parliament, the timing of the general election on July 4th poses logistical challenges due to pre-planned royal engagements in Scotland. Adjustments to the royal diary are inevitable, illustrating the delicate interplay between ceremonial duties and constitutional responsibilities that the modern British monarchy navigates. The royal family's responsiveness to such changes reflects their commitment to uphold traditions while adapting to the demands of governance and public service.